I popped the question to my fiancé a whopping 7 months ago. We'd been together for about a year, and I figured it was high time to do it. But here's the kicker. I wasn't up for a huge wedding bash. I thought it'd be a total money drain for no good reason. Yet she was all in for a big extravagant one. And guess who she wanted to foot the bill? Yep, yours truly. And I straight up said no because I couldn't even come close to affording it. Here's the twist. We also had 3 kids in the mix. I had a daughter, and she had 2 daughters. My little one was the youngest of the bunch. Money was tight, and we had to watch our spending carefully. I could tell she wasn't too thrilled about it. In the end, we both gave a bit. I agreed to loosen the purse strings a tad, and she finally accepted the idea of splitting the wedding expenses the way it should be. But then she dropped a bombshell. She wanted a wedding without any kids, and I was left pondering that idea. I really wanted my daughter to be part of the wedding celebration, but she was dead set on that no kids rule. So against my own wishes, I gave in. I asked her to make an effort to bond more with my daughter. They got along fine, but they weren't super close. She assured me that they would grow closer over time, and I trusted her. I understood that building a strong relationship would take time, especially because I had seen how well she connected with her own daughters, and it was pretty amazing. It was honestly a beautiful thing, and I wished my daughter could have that same experience. That feeling was what initially pushed me to propose. However, as time went by, it became evident that she was seriously stressed out about the wedding preparations. So, I made it my mission to pamper and ease her stress as much as humanly possible. I understood that planning a wedding could be incredibly nerve-wracking. But here's the kicker. I was right there with her every step of the way. I had my hand in every decision and was fully involved in the entire process. I didn't force her to spend time with my daughter, but I did mention it a couple of times. I wanted to give them both space to form their relationship naturally. I did send my daughter towards her a few times, but she usually ignored her, telling her she was busy or making up an excuse. I didn't like it. I could see she spent time with her daughters. Now that we are going to be a family, she should make an effort too. 3 months into the engagement, I brought it up. I told her what I felt and explained to her that my daughter was an important part of my life. And now that she and I were engaged, I expected her to make an effort towards my daughter. I decided to turn the tables on her and asked how she'd feel if I completely ignored her daughters and barely had any contact with them. That seemed to hit home, and she actually apologized to me. She promised to step up and put in more effort. Fast forward 2 months, and she had taken my daughter out 2 to 3 times. It might not have been a lot, but at least she was making an effort. I understood that the wedding was nearing and she had other things to do too. My daughter was really sad that she couldn't come to the wedding. I felt really bad. I spoke to my fiancé about it and asked her to at least agree to let our kids be there. After all, they were our family. She said it would be too stressful and she didn't want them to make a mess. I tried to explain the situation to my daughter, but she was hurt and shed a few tears. It honestly broke my heart because I really wanted her to be a part of my special day. But she understood. Now, let's fast forward to the big day, my wedding. When I walked into the venue, I was absolutely blown away by how everything looked. It was stunning. However, as I strolled in and glanced around, I was taken aback. I couldn't believe my eyes. Both of her daughters and some of her nieces were there. I stopped midway in shock. I had lost her and tried to convince her to at least our kids be at the wedding. And here I see all the kids and her family standing there all dressed up. I felt angry. This was a no-kids wedding, right? Then why were they there? I walked right back out. I could hear the whispers behind me. It was mostly all family and friends, so around 30 people. The doors of the venue shut. Her sister came out a minute later and asked me what happened. I asked why there were kids at the wedding. She grew nervous and tried to make an excuse, but I blew her off and walked away. I tried calling my fiancé because I wanted an answer, but I couldn't reach her. 10 minutes later, a car pulled up and it was my fiancé. As she got out, she smiled at me, confused. And I was very angry at this point. I had seen the look on my daughter's face when I told her she couldn't attend. She was a part of me and I loved her to death. I had still compromised for my fiancé as she walked near me. I spit out, "Why are the kids at the wedding?" I could see the surprise on her face. I didn't get an answer. Everybody was out of the car and questioning what was going on. I asked her again, "Why are your daughters and nieces, practically every child in your family, there at the venue? This is a no-kids wedding, right?" She began with some explanation and I patiently waited. Then she dropped the bombshell. It was a last-minute decision because they couldn't find anyone to babysit her daughters and nieces. Can you even believe it? I couldn't help but burst out laughing right in her face. I asked her if she thought I was some kind of fool. I reminded her of how much I had wanted my daughter to be there. And yet, she had been so insistent on this no-kids rule. And now she was telling me that this was a last-minute decision. I laughed in her face again. I asked her where she had managed to get matching dresses at the last moment. Her mother came up to me and asked me not to make a scene for such a small thing. And I lost it. I yelled at her to back off. I glared at her and asked her how she would feel if her fiancé's daughters and nieces were all there at a no-kids wedding. And her daughter wasn't. That shut her up. Her father didn't know what was going on. He asked his daughter about it as she was starting to tear up. I was raging, though. I asked if this is what she meant by starting a family. I let her know that my daughter was nowhere to be found in that mix. She immediately started stammering, claiming it was all a big mistake. She apologized and reached out to hold my hand. But I quickly stepped away. I looked her dead in the eyes and told her that this was absolutely not what I had in mind when I got down on one knee and proposed to her. I turned on my heel, walked back inside, and headed straight for the minister. I boldly snatched the microphone from his hand and took the stage to announce myself. I told him all that there was a change in plans. She had come running in at this moment. I announced that the wedding was off. I made the reason very clear I didn't want to be painted as the bad guy. I explained to all of them exactly what had happened and why the wedding was canceled. She ran out in embarrassment. I was so angry. After that, I walked out with my family behind me. I went back home with my best man, who was my best friend and the godfather to my daughter. He didn't say much, but stood by me. He knew how I felt. Update 115 days later. Over the next few days, I had to sort out everything with all the people that were involved in the wedding arrangements. But the most important thing I had to do was explain to my daughter why the wedding didn't happen. When I got back home, I just hugged her and spent the whole day with her. She asked questions at first, but then she stopped and just played with me. I had packed all my fiancé stuff and kept it outside. I didn't want to talk to her or interact with her. In hindsight, I can admit that I could have handled the situation more gracefully. But in that moment, all I could think about was how much worse things might get for my daughter. And I was absolutely livid. I realized I had made a huge mistake by proposing to her. I should have taken more time to evaluate our relationship. I was just so blinded by what I thought could be that I didn't see the reality of what it was. The fact that she had the audacity to reveal that I funded the entire wedding says a lot about her character. Opie should have hauled his ass miles away from her the moment she mentioned this AAA. Opie was blinded by green flags that weren't even there. He dodged quite a few bullets at the end. So her daughters and nieces were all there when asked. She couldn't even come up with a proper reason. Really? Last-minute decision. What did she think would happen? That since it was the wedding day, Opie would just suck it up and go along with her bullshit. LOL. Stupid bitch. Opie clearly loves his daughter. It sucks to have walked in and seen all the children from her family but none from his side. Not even his own. Though I think he could have handled it in a better way. His rage is justified. He is not the a-hole. His ex is a huge one for trying to pull that shit. What was the fiancé thinking? And then her mother tried to cover it up by telling Opie to not make a scene. Bro, your fiancé already made one by inviting all the children on her side of the family, but none on his. Opie definitely made the right call by ending things with her right then and there. And the way she handled the situation afterward only sealed her fate. She's got no way out of this mess now. By the way, kudos to Opie for being an amazing dad. He knew where his priorities lay and stuck to them. That's some serious respect right there. Now, on to the next story. My son has 2 boys, ages 16 and 12. Their mom, my son's first wife, tragically passed away a decade ago. My son and the boys were lost. 8 months later, my son met a woman and fell very hard and fast for her. He admitted to his dad and I that he felt like everything could be perfect again. The boys could have a mom present and he could have a wife again. We want him that. It might not be that easy, but he was so happy again and appeared to have lightened after meeting her. So he tried not to say too much. His oldest son, for the sake of the post, we'll call him Cole, did not take to my son's now second wife, Emma, very easily. My son and Emma married 2 years after his first wife died. Emma had lived with him 6 months prior to the wedding. The youngest, Jamie, started to call Emma mom almost immediately. But he was so little with no memories of his mom. Cole was different. He did not want to call her mom and did not like the idea of her being his second mom. He was adamant. He did not want her like that. It became especially clear during the wedding that things would not go well. My son and Emma planned a small exchange between her and the boys meant to be a sweet moment to celebrate the joining of the family. However, Cole wanted absolutely no part in it and decided to sit out while his brother and Emma got involved. Following that, we recommended that our son consider therapy for everyone involved. And he agreed to it. It's become evident that our son has developed some resentment toward Cole for not fully accepting Emma and becoming a part of the family the way he had hoped. Their relationship is undeniably peculiar, with Cole being polite but keeping his distance from Emma. He treats them more like he does his teachers than he does the rest of the family. And it angers our son. I have seen my son visibly frustrated when Cole calls her Emma or when he talks about his mom. A few days ago, my son was ranting and raving about how Cole was a stubborn brat and how he will never be able to understand why he can't accept Emma as a mom too. He said the adoptive kids don't dig in their heels this way and refuse to accept a new parent. Most are so grateful to have someone, he said. It's disrespectful to him, Emma, and to Jamie that it undermines the family they all want to have, and Cole refuses to try. Also, that he wishes Cole was more like Jamie, that Jamie handled things right, tackle as disrespectful to him as his dad by not listening. And he also said he finds it hard to look at Cole and feel the same as he does for Jamie because of all this. I reprimanded him for talking like that about Cole. I told him he needs to get over himself and accept his son and find a way to accept that neither Cole nor Jamie's way is inherently right. And it's about what's right for them as individuals. I also told him Cole can feel every bit of that anger and one day he will lose his son if he can't accept the truth for Cole and let go of all this frustration. My son told me I will never understand and should not speak to him like he's a child. My parents split when I was just 7 years old. My dad, a Navy man, was pretty much absent from my life from 1st grade all the way to 8th grade. And after that, I didn't see him at all. When I was 16, my mom got together with my stepdad. By that point, I had grown accustomed to the idea of not having a father figure around. My stepdad wasn't trying to replace my dad, but he stepped up to take care of me, chipped in for college, helped me out with my car, and all that jazz. My mom pushed so hard, so fast for me to call him Dad, like before they were ever married or engaged. She really ruined it for me. I'm one of those people that if they're told to do something, they do the opposite. Now that I'm older and he's been in my life longer than my real dad ever was, I would like to call him Dad, but I can't get over the mental block of that being what my mom wanted and tried to force on me. If I called him Dad, I know she would make it into a huge deal, and I just can't cope with that, which sucks for me and him because I deserve a dad and he deserves to be called Dad. I say all of that to say that his dad doing all of this and treating him this way may contribute to him never being able to call her mom. Oh, this whole thing is really upsetting to me. My partner passed away 4.5 years ago when we had a 10 and 3-year-old, and I also had a 16-year-old had lost his dad 5 years beforehand, and he was close with his stepdad. They're now 8, 15, and 21. I couldn't ever imagine taking this stance as the surviving parent. I waited 3+ years to think about dating seriously, and I'm now in an amazing relationship with someone, and he has 3 teenage kids. Neither one of us is under any expectation of each other's children thinking of us as primary parents. Step-parents, sure, but that's completely different from forcing a relationship. I'd be over the moon if his kids someday saw me as a rock-solid parent figure, someone they could truly rely on and talk to about anything. But let's face it, it's pretty darn complicated when it comes to your real mom and dad. My own kids are totally cool with having awesome people in their lives, but only the youngest might still be open to having a parental figure. Funny enough, she's the one who's been the most visibly shaken by her dad's sudden passing. The thing that isn't getting is that you don't get to replace the deceased parents. You may be lucky when you introduce someone into their lives, but they should never be expected to accept a new parental figure, especially so soon after their beloved mother's death. This whole thought process is awful, and I don't like it. And to OP, but your son sure is. It's amazing that he thinks that a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old would react the same way to a mother's death. A 2-year-old doesn't exactly understand, though they may be upset. For a 6-year-old, a parent's death is a world-shattering event because you know that everything will now change. But you don't have the kind of coping mechanisms that a lot of adults have. He will have felt completely betrayed and abandoned by his father because to him at 6, it feels like his mom is being replaced. And by the sounds of it, that's exactly what has occurred. Jamie handled things the right way because he was so young and could easily accept a new parent. Cole was always going to have a harder time. It's just heartbreaking that this kid lost his mom and is now about to lose his dad, too. And the worst part is, his dad is acting like a selfish jerk, holding a grudge against a literal child for not moving on from his mom's memory in just 6 months, even though it happened a decade ago. Shocking, isn't it? Next story. I was married to an amazing man for a whole decade. Tragically, he was taken from us in a car accident when our kids were just 6 and 4 years old. 5 years after my first husband's passing, I remarried. My new husband brought his 11-year-old son into our family, which now includes my 2 children, who are 15 and 13, and our 3-year-old daughter. His parents set up a trust fund for his son and our daughter. When I inquired about whether they planned to do something similar for my 2 stepkids, my husband's response was that it would be unfair to ask his parents to allocate funds for kids who had recently become part of the family. I accepted his answer because my older kids have money from their dad's life insurance, so they have a good nest egg already. My first husband's parents are great people and have accepted my stepson and my daughter as bonus grandkids. They have made an effort to treat them well and always include them in gifts for the family and on their birthdays and Christmas. My parents have also made an effort to be nice, but they are more standoffish with my stepson. They have a cordial relationship and always send him gifts and invite him along on family events. My parents just sold their farm and are splitting the proceeds amongst all of my siblings and I. All the grandkids are also getting some money. The amount that my 2 sons and my daughter are receiving is about 5 times the amount that is in the trust funds that my stepson and daughter got from my husband's parents. My husband is now saying that it isn't fair that 3 of the kids are getting so much more. I said that it wasn't my money and that my parents could decide for themselves how it should be split up. He believes that all the money for the kids should be pooled together and divided equally. I've decided not to get into the legal aspects of it as it's not my money to decide about. He accuses me of being unreasonable for singling out my stepson, but my stance remains that it's not up to me to decide. When I talked to my parents about it, they mentioned they might consider splitting my daughter's money with him since they are half-siblings, but that's as far as they would go. That would mean that she gets less than her brothers. I just want to leave everything alone. RTA. I don't actually have a bio dad in my life, so forgive me if this story is confusing. The man I call dad married my mother when I was 1. They divorced when I was 13. This man is my dad. I have never called him stepdad or even thought of him that way. My mom has now been married to a different man, my stepdad, for almost 30 years now. There's nothing wrong with my dad. He is my dad. I love him. We spend time together and all that. But I wouldn't say we're close. He's not even in the top 3 people I would call if I were in trouble. It's not because he's done anything wrong. It just is. I'm very close to my stepdad. We talk all the time. I would call him in an emergency before my mom because I know he won't flip and that he will be able to communicate the issue with my mom. We had some hard times when I was a teen. But over the years, we learned to communicate and just grew close. The thing is, the story I just shared isn't the type you usually find on websites like this. People don't normally pop up to say, "Hey, my step-parent is pretty awesome." Nah, what grabs attention here are the crazy extreme situations. Let me tell you, after dealing with a nasty divorce from an abusive dude, I swore off long-term relationships. But then, once the divorce was finally done and dusted, I went and did something completely idiotic. I rushed into marriage during the love-bombing phase. I married my whole phase. I kept my dating separate from my daughter. Abusive ex realized it was expensive to try and use my daughter to control me and hasn't been around in 2 years. After spending 2 years sporadically in and out enough to try and abuse me through her. Not that he did anything when he was around. My 5-year-old never said dada, which, since you don't have kids, you may not know that dada is typically the first word because it's easier to say than mama. That's how little he put into the kid who carries his DNA. Then I started dating and eventually married my neighbor. We had a baby in August. He treats and loves my older daughter the exact same his family, and my 5-year-old would literally fight you if you tried to say she wasn't his daughter. His mom was over the moon to not just get the daughter she always wanted, but to grant daughters as well. His father and he have made it clear on numerous occasions that my older child is absolutely amazing, and they believe that if my ex-husband is willing to throw away his role as a father, then good riddance. They consider it an honor to be part of my child's life as a father figure. It's worth noting that I had never intended to have another baby or a husband. When I suddenly decided to do both, my friends and family were left utterly stunned and shocked. My husband farts mother freaking rainbows. He's the best. I'm glad I got both. I'm not telling you to go out and look. Don't go. He'll undo you. But don't wall off your heart to the idea of a life partner, because when you least expect it, you may meet your best friend and the weirdest, kindest person you've ever met who just makes you feel the most loved and supported. Whenever I see topics on blended families, it seems like such a huge minefield to experience. Lots of parents seem to put themselves and their wants and needs first above the kids. I get it. The kids won't be happy if you're happy. But if your new happy life is making your kids miserable when kids get trauma out of it, or you have cases like this where everyone seems to have taken the blending well and then bam, something like this comes up. In situations like the one described above, it's easy to feel that it's unfair, especially when one set of grandparents treats all the grandchildren equally but then decides that inheritance should follow biological lines. On the one hand, it might seem unfair. But on the other hand, can they really be blamed for it? They might simply want to ensure that their biological grandkids are well provided for. And usually, there isn't an issue in that regard. It's a complex situation with different perspectives to consider. Lots of posts here from step-siblings, etc., where people say that your inheritance is your inheritance and you don't have to share it. But on the other hand, at least in this case, both sets of kids will get something and nobody will be left without. Does it suck that some kids will get more? Yeah, it probably does. And it will suck to explain it to kids and basically to tell them to suck the circumstances up. But this is how life is. And I didn't see the husband running to share before when his biological kids were going to be set up. So the husband is completely AH in this for wanting to share now. Such a minefield. Next story. My oldest son is turning 7 in February. We're throwing him his first big birthday party that will have both friends and family. He's so excited about it. My sister and her husband Adam have my niece Eve, who is 8. Eve is adopted. This becomes somewhat relevant due to the argument. But when she was 2, Eve was diagnosed with a string of medical conditions and health problems. Some are more serious than the rest. She's in and out of hospital, and they have been warned her life might not be long if they cannot manage all the various health problems she has. It was a huge blow for my sister and Adam, but the whole family. Eve's health has become a topic that gets brought up everything to family. Weddings were taken over when my sister brought up how sick she was and alluded to the fact she did not have long left. Despite her assuring the family on a number of occasions that things were not that bad. One of those weddings happened to be our brother's big day. Imagine being the happy uncle in the spotlight and suddenly everyone's talking about the tragic situation of having a terminally ill niece and the whole focus shifts to her. To make matters worse, she even made a big fuss during the toast. Almost as if she was hinting that someone should start a crowdfunding campaign to cover the treatment costs. Without outright asking that, my brother was furious and his wife Mia was upset that instead of being a happy day, most people ended up in a very somber mood at the wedding. This has also happened at birthday parties, block parties, etc. She brought it up at a couple of baby showers we attended together, and I assume some outside of that also. It's a lot, and every time it feels like everyone ends up sad, depressed, and uncomfortable. My sister and Adam have been spoken to about it before, and they claim they don't do it if she doesn't always get what's going on, and sometimes she's too poor to care. With my oldest son's party coming up, I felt like this was something I needed to try to prevent. So I asked her if she would not bring up Evie's health at the party. She told me she's not going to pretend everything's okay if people ask, and that it's important to make it known so people don't try to push her too much. I told her I do not want the whole party to become about Evie being sick again. I let her know that it's not fair, and I completely understood why she felt that way. So I suggested that they shouldn't attend the party if their main agenda was to constantly bring up Evie's health. Well, my sister didn't take too kindly to that. She got absolutely furious, accused me of not caring about Evie's illness just because she's adopted, and even went as far as to imply that I would be more compassionate if Evie were my biological niece. She even questioned why I seemed to care so little about her. She also told me I was an asshole for trying to gloss over the pain they feel and for excluding them when they live in hell every day. 8. I want to talk about Evie to the youngest child in my care. We'll be fortunate to live to my current age. Keto is not biologically mine and has a harder start than most. A lot smaller and a little slower than her peers. She's absolute sunshine. My heart breaks knowing her time might be short, but I make sure she enjoys all of it. Parents need to give children space to be who they are and give them a chance to grow. Nothing in parenting is for certain, only that everything they chose for themselves can be a delightful surprise. I can't imagine reminding every one of my kids' medical issues and needs when every family gets together. I do everything so my kids can flourish in whatever they do. OP, I don't believe your sister is mature enough to parent right now. Maybe they need to grieve or something, but looking for the spotlight on the back of Evie's medical needs in every situation is too much. She absolutely has to get it through her head. Her daughter deserves a safe and supportive environment to grow up and keep her personal life private for the future. If all the important folks are already in the know, there's absolutely no valid reason to keep bringing it up unless they're just craving more attention. But why, you might ask? Are they drowning in a sea of overwhelming feelings, desperately needing some personal space? Do they feel like life is zooming past them, leaving them behind in the dust? Suggest therapy and no longer invite them to large events until they work on their issues? I would suggest smaller get-togethers so they can work on not making that the top topic for every event, or maybe creating specific events for Evie, specific things she would like and find joy in. I agree. I know someone who has had 4 terminally ill children, genetic, extremely rare, only manifested in the eldest around the age of 5 when mom was already pregnant the 3rd time, which ended up with twins. One of the kids died last year in her teens for terminally ill children. I'm telling you, you can't make up something so horrible. I'm that girl who always finds something to say. But when she first told me her story in whispers, I couldn't find words or air. I'm pretty sure my heart stopped for terminally ill children. Her 2 youngest, most beautiful, identical twins were staring at me from the side, looking completely normal, smiling, playing with their dolls and chatting like 5-year-olds do. They hadn't started degenerating yet. It's been almost a decade and I've watched the kids lose mobility, muscle control, and brain function, and ultimately they'll lose the ability to breathe. They're wheelchair-bound and drooling, expressionless and clueless. Never has that mother made an event or get-together about her or her children. Never. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.